Ahead of the curve, from Prince to billion view live streams. This is how the future of entertainment gets built.
Welcome to Rise to Lead, where unique perspectives redefine leadership.
We are back on Rise to Lead. Welcome, everyone. With me today is John Petrocelli, a pioneer in the live stream industry and founder and CEO of Bulldog DM, where he's helped create some of the most watched live streams in the world. And when she heard Bulldog, she moved for a moment. Yeah, the little doggy behind me. I guess that's something that rings a bell. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's see. I have a little, for those listening, I have a little doggy behind me today. I'm taking care of a friend's dog. So here we go. And yes, so John has been driving over 1 billion audience engagements. Wow. He has worked with global brands like Apple and Netflix and led live streaming for major events, including Coachella, the Grammys, and the Oscars. Early in his career, he collaborated with Prince on one of the first direct-to-consumer digital music platforms, earning major industry awards, and has been part of startups acquired by AEG, Google, and Akamai. Welcome, John. Delighted to have you on.
Thanks, Regina. I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to have this conversation today.
So am I. So am I. So tell us a bit about your backstory. How did you get to do what you do today?
Originally I was working in corporate Fortune 100 sales in Boston, and I migrated from kind of the computer sector to telecommunications, and which gave birth to the internet. And I realized I enjoyed that sector, but I wanted to operate more in a creative environment. And I realized that the entertainment industry required business people to help navigate and structure deals around tours for music artists or set up major blockbuster feature films or TV shows. And I moved across the country from Boston to LA, and you have to start, as everybody does in Hollywood, in the quote mailroom and learn the Hollywood from the bottom up. And I was able to do that. And eventually, I realized that, or I should say, Hollywood realized that the internet was you couldn't deny that it was coming. And there was just a lot of concern that people had in Hollywood around what would happen to them, equivalent to what happened to the music industry, where a lot of the content was essentially pirated. So I kind of borrowed the knowledge I had from my telecom and internet work with this, baptism by fire and knowledge of Hollywood. And really, I saw those two worlds connected at streaming. So I was able to then go into movie studios, broadcasters, sports leagues, and have conversations with them and understand what their apprehensions were and what their fears were, and address them and talk through them, but also talk about what streaming could do for them, open up new avenues of connectivity and engagement, and really the ability to reach almost anyone, anywhere, at any time on the planet. So that's was my journey, and I've now been in streaming for almost 20 years, and particularly my focus has been on now I've migrated into live streaming, years, very pretty much early in my career, and part of that was certainly informed by working with Prince. So that's been the journey.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about him
Yeah,
because, of
sure.
course, there's a lot of stuff going on in and around Hollywood that we're not going to go into today
Good.
because we're going to focus on really your experience, which I'm sure has nothing to do with what I'm just thinking of. But um, so yeah, definitely coming back to that in a little bit. But I want to focus on something else right now. So you built your career really by operating ahead of the curve, right? So how has that shaped the way you lead yourself when there's no clear playbook?
The thing that attracted me to streaming was really Mark Cuban, right? And I had
Mhm.
noticed that, well, I think everybody did, that Yahoo came in and bought his quote streaming business for $5.7 billion. And I started to research anything and everything about him, and I realized that he was a highly entrepreneurial person who had a big thirst for learning, but also was unequivocally fearless to fail. I mean, it was not he realized that he learned more from failing, and also had a pretty astute business background, and that kind of triggered in me. I had operated in more traditional industries, but I thought, this world is going to open up and change really how everything, advertising, content is generated and created. And that's kind of the governing, that kind of got me into this area. And then it really became a thirst for knowledge, right? How quickly can I learn things? And the beauty of the internet is there are sources of information. There's things like LinkedIn, there are newsletters, and I've done, and I still do to this day, my best to keep abreast of what's happening. And the real gist here is, skate to where the puck is going versus where it already is. And obviously, Mark Cuban was kind of the poster person for that strategy. And we didn't have TikTok even 5 or 6 years ago, right? That's changed how video is rendered and delivered and how it's consumed. And I think there are now 170 million Americans on a platform like that. So I've always taken the philosophy that we can't just be comfortable resting on our laurels today. It's got to be you got to look at the road ahead of you and see what developments are out there across the marketplace.
Right. So you're saying, John, that you are doing your best to keep abreast of what's going on, but you've also actually consistently moved early in new tech spaces, right? And so how do you then decide when to trust your instinct versus wait for more information? Or in other words, when you're building something in a space that's still undefined, what tells you that you're on the right track?
It's a great point. And for me, it has been, customers. And I've always wanted to, work with the biggest, most exciting customers that I possibly could. And I was able to, when I started this business, get into business with a brand like Coca-Cola. And shortly thereafter, it was AT&T. And also I've had a long relationship with YouTube and Google. And those are well-funded, well-researched, very knowledgeable, companies. And if they would come to me and say, "Hey, we're thinking about marketing our 5G services and how we, that's an important part of the growth of a company like AT&T," or Coca-Cola would say, "Hey, we want to amplify our on-premise work that we're doing at a major property like a music festival." So that would trigger things in me, and then I would translate that to my team. Hey, we should be thinking about, 5G. What is that? How is that going to affect consumers? Not only a brand like AT&T, but other stakeholders in that ecosystem. And for me, working with customers and listening to them, and it's true of prospects too. That's always a great indicator of what the future is ahead and where it's going and what they're thinking, especially big brands that are highly consumer facing, right? They're servicing consumers all over the globe, and they're great sources of direction in industries, and that's always been a real help for me.
Okay, so talking about customers, right? Um, you have partnered with both with high level artists and also with global brands. So what's different, if anything, about leading creatives or working with creatives in this way versus corporate teams?
Uh,
Is it,
you know,
is there a difference?
it's well, I've when I started this business, I realized that where those two worlds intersect is a pretty interesting world in which to operate. And I'll use, Coachella as an example. AEG, who owns Coachella, had bought my company and brought myself and my team in to run streaming both across the company, but also really externally. And I realized that AT&T or AEG wanted to stream Coachella, but they had these very big Herculean tasks ahead of them. They had to book the bands, sell the tickets, and manage on-site sponsorships like Heineken, the official beer, or Verizon, the official mobile carrier of the festival. For them to wrap their heads around amplifying and broadcasting and live streaming the festival, it was a lot of work for them. And I realized that that burden would be lessened by a partner, either a sponsor or a platform. And eventually, I played a role in the conversation about taking Coachella and live broadcasting it on a platform like YouTube, which eventually became sponsored by State Farm or T-Mobile, or one year was Wrigley's Five Gum. And you're now, you're living in a realm, there's corporate, tech, and creative involved, not to mention, 130 artists across multiple stages. But boy, that's a fascinating world to operate in. And now I think, I've seen statistics, there's 125,000 people at a festival like that each day, but it was publicly listed that the year Beyonce played, there were 89.2 million, viewers of that experience, which was a massive, massive success. But yes, getting feedback from all of those stakeholders who have different interests, but they're all pushing towards an aligned goal, I think is was never a dull moment. And also for the world I operate in, it's live. There's no, hey, we got to do this in post or recut it or change things. It's happening in the moment. And, fortunately, paying attention to what's happening in the chat or working a lot in this industry, I realize that this is what people want. They want to have real-time, collaborative, participatory experiences, but they also really value authenticity. I think now, certainly now more than ever, with the growth of things like AI, live is, looking at it now as maybe the last bastion of true authenticity. So managing all those dynamics together has been pretty intriguing. But a lot of the work I've done in things like live music, it's really been in partnerships with brands. So we've worked with brands like in music, AT&T, Coca-Cola, Wells Fargo, Samsung, etc. And it's not easy to service both of those interests, but when they are aligned and they're really amplifying and bringing it out to a much larger audience, obviously I should say there's better alignment and we're able to execute and do our job. But certainly we have to be cognizant of both of those, both sets of interests.
Yeah, I get that. You're literally at the intersection of tech, of music, and of the brands and everything. Like you're in the middle, right? And
Correct. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I can see that. Yes. So tell us more about your work with Prince. I've been looking forward to this question because I totally love Prince, not just for his music and for his work as an artist. And I was lucky to see him live many, many, many years ago in Munich when I still lived there. So basically, I don't know how many decades ago now. So, but I also love him for his personality, and mostly actually for his standing up and telling the truth about things, right? He was dropping a lot of truth bombs. And he's one of the few artists who actually stayed true to himself and who actually had the guts to do that. So I definitely want to hear more about that, just in general terms. So what was it like to work with him?
Well, to me, it was career changing and career, defining. Not only was he an incredibly gifted, creative powerhouse, he was curious and also very fearless about trying anything with technology. And I had gotten into business with him, back years ago. There was something called the Format Wars, and it was Microsoft's Windows Media Player versus Real Player and Apple's QuickTime. And it was this kind of battle for at the time, the desktop. And I was operating in the content delivery world, meaning just general streaming. I was really acting as Switzerland, neutral and supporting all three of those formats. And Apple came to me and said, "Hey, you're doing a great job with QuickTime. We were approached by an artist who wants to go direct and do this themselves. Would you be interested in connecting and speaking with them?" And I said, "Sure. Who is it?" And the response was Prince, and I couldn't believe it. And I'm a massive, longtime fan. And at about that time, I was getting into the idea of anti-piracy and digital rights management and content authorization and content security, which is a very complex, layered thing to articulate and explain to literally anybody. And to shorten that conversation, I took a copy of Purple Rain off of a file network and I had it encrypted and I sent it over to one of his team members. And when you went to play the song, a message would render that said, "Hey, Regina, you need to be authorized. You need to either pay 99 cents to download the song, or be a member of Prince's online, fan community." And I got this email back literally in the middle of the night, which is when Prince operated, and it was someone on his team saying, "Prince says in quotes, this is exactly what I want to do," and I was spelled EYE, and it was the number two, which is literally how he communicated also in his writing, in addition to song lyrics and liner notes of records. And we were quickly off to the races. So I built this with my engineering team, this download music store that you had to go through Prince's online site and sign up and register and pay a lifetime membership fee. And he filled it with unreleased songs, videos, clips of him performing live, full-length records, new music that he would generate and create. And it was fascinating. And he also decided that he was going to go on a pretty significant tour. I think the most significant tour of his life, and play nothing but arenas in the round around his symbol. And he came back to us and said, I want to sell the best, three, four, 5,000 seats only available to my club members. So we had to build then on the fly a ticketing system as well, because the whole world now is signing up for this music, the fan club, and because knowing that you'd have the ability to get the best seats to arguably the greatest live performer in history. And we pulled that off, and he had this incredible run over multiple years, and he won a Billboard Award for Best Use of Technology by an Artist, a Webby Award, and a Webby, Lifetime Achievement Award. And more importantly, I was also able to go see him prepare for this tour in a couple of amazing performances. I got to see him perform all over the country. I've got to see him play in London, and it kind of changed how I realized, rather than me calling my friends up and saying, "I just walked out of this incredible 3-hour marathon performance in the Foundation Room at the House of Blues." There would come a day where this would be a shared experience, meaning you would be streaming it if you were in Munich or Berlin, and I had a friend in Miami. We could all collaborate and watch this together. I knew that day was coming, which really pushed me into the live world. And also, I realized too that when a creative comes to you, the answer can't be just flat out no, it's never been done before, or technology doesn't work that way. I would say, let's find a way to try to make that work, or let's look at how to nuance and change things that we can get as close to your creative vision as you want, but also is still a good user experience for people on their mobile phones or their connected devices. And that's really also, for me as an entrepreneur, it's allowed me to step into almost any creative conversation with a music artist, because I have that background and that pedigree of working with someone that they all have incredible respect for the things that he did, not only as a music artist, but as someone who mentors and creates and writes, and also his use of technology at a very early time in the era. I mean, back then it was really primarily download, and we hadn't even got to a streaming world. But an incredible experience. And again, he was just absolutely fearless. He was willing to do or try any concept. But the real thing for him was, I want to have a direct relationship with my fan, rather than go through what he called, middlemen, or you use the term merchants. For him, it was, I have that ability, and I want to go ahead and do that. So, but again, it really shaped, how I operate as an entrepreneur, but also how I run my business and how I engage potential, clients as well.
Yeah, you said fearless, and that's definitely something that's expressed in many different ways in Prince. So I can see that absolutely. And everything you described, I mean, I know quite a bit about him, but this is insider information that is really, really cool to hear. So thanks for sharing that, John. Now, let's move a little bit in a different into a different direction. So you've had companies acquired and scaled fast so far in your life, and how did your leadership have to evolve in those moments?
I've consistently taken the approach that really looking through the lens of the customer is going to help any entrepreneurial business and understanding and really what are how do we help solve challenges that they face? Yeah, I would probably look back on starting this business as I probably did it maybe 2 years early, but it afforded me, if I go back to the example of Coachella and how do we get that off the ground? How do we bring in a partner? How do we make that stream happen? I look at it almost, the same way of going to brands and marketers and saying, the world is changing. What challenges are you facing? And early on, I would hear it's cord cutting, brand safety, and ad blocking. Help us solve these three challenges. We're super concerned. Combined with, we're trying to figure out how do we talk to this younger generation that is largely driving this experience economy, right? They really value shared experiences with their friends over maybe buying at the time a house or a watch or a car. And I was able to, because I was early and this was a hot topic, got into some conversations and some rooms and some calls and some meetings, certainly across Madison Avenue with some brands, and was able to build solutions and strategies and really a business on solving just that. How do I help a brand if they're doing something, an activation, they're launching a product, or they're partnering with a creator and they're doing maybe it's also a sports personality. How can we help them bring that to a bigger audience? And just the idea of amplifying a kickoff event or even a sponsored red carpet premiere, I think then became once we were able to execute and to do that, that helped the business. So to your question is, I've always tried to lead by listening and prioritizing solving customer challenges and also future challenges, right? They're all, we're now living in a hyper exploding world of AI, and that comes with some positives. It also comes with some inherent challenges, but that has been I would say, my main focus in running, leading, and certainly starting a business. But also, that's also been the day-to-day. I mean, we want to provide really consultative help and services wherever we can. I don't ever want to profess to lecture down to my clients. And also, I draw from that Prince experience, right? I don't want to open the conversation by saying no. It's let me hear your idea and your vision and what you're trying to accomplish. And my team and I will listen and we'll try to come back with, maybe two or three ways that we can possibly pull this off. Possibly pull it off to the scale that you want it, but also achieve and reach some of the aligned goals that you have as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the Prince experience again because it actually, what you just said reminded me of that as well. So I was gonna do the same. And yeah, when you don't say no, you open up new possibilities. That's how innovation happens, right? That's how innovative creation happens. So yeah, absolutely.
It's so true. And, even I remember him, this is probably back in, I want to say 2004. He was intrigued by connecting with his fans in China, right? This is 15 years prior to what China is as a market today. And, I was blown away by how he was wired and thinking that way. And at the time, I was working for I had a tech company underneath a massive global pay television company that had a presence and had a customer in China. But that was, I think, at the time pretty rare. But his mind was, my fans are everywhere, and I know I have fans in that part of the world. How do I engage them and how do I connect with them? And that was the first time I had ever heard anybody, corporation, enterprise, or an artist or an individual even think that's a market that I need to focus on. So again, that was a big help to me is like, how do we do that? How do we solve that? How do we help him connect to that part of the world. And again, that's certainly helped. That's always been in the back of my mind is some of these asks that he had still today resonate with how we run our business and how we operate.
Right. So two visionary thinkers and leaders found each other, it seems to me. That attraction was definitely there somewhere, that energetic attraction. Okay. Well, yeah. You also increased revenue dramatically at AEG, at Anschutz Entertainment Group, right? Did
Mhm.
I get that right? So, what did you do differently as a leader? What do you think that made that kind of growth possible?
It was just prior to being acquired, I had gone to YouTube and said, you need to be thinking about live streaming. And at the time, YouTube was just a VOD platform, no real live tech stack. And they said, why? I said, well, one, you're going to bring a hyper engaged audience to these experiences. And then post show, you could expose them to all the content related to what they just watched. And the planets aligned, and Alicia Keys was performing at the AEG venue in Times Square. And it was going to be a live stream on YouTube presented to the viewer and sponsored by American Express. And this was really the first live stream in YouTube's history, certainly from a professionally produced uh, perspective, as well as having a brand involved. And we we did all the live multi-camera filming of the show, provided all the tech, even the video player. And post-show, YouTube came back to me and said, you were right. The way this was done, we had a delighted music artist, and I think at the time, by the time the concert ended, her pre-sale album was in the top 10 on iTunes. They said we had a really happy audience, and people in the chat were just buzzing about how they could have a shared experience. And we had a really happy brand in American Express. We want to be in this business. But we don't do that today. We don't, this is not our world. And we quickly struck an agreement and we went on for the next, I think, about 3 years. We powered everything on the YouTube platform. Coachella, Bonnaroo, Rock in Rio, Lollapalooza, premieres for brands, product launches, and even tentpole events like Oracle Open World. And that led to obviously, in addition to other things we were doing as that business, we became the streaming entity that powered things like the Grammys, Oscars, Masters, TED Conference, et cetera. That led to pretty significant revenue growth, given how YouTube embraced live video and how much they really ran with it. And we were even doing things like the Indian Premier League of cricket. I think we did 74 four-hour cricket matches in like a 45-day window. So that led to massive revenue growth across the board. But more importantly for me, I think it awoken that I realize now this is a real business. And it's not just going to be YouTube or just AEG. It's going to be almost ubiquitous. There'll be all kinds of other places to consume and stream media. And that led me to want to go out and start this business that I started. I was able to bring a couple of key people with me. And then shortly thereafter, I was able to bring over the chief operating officer of Insomniac, which is the big dance division of Live Nation. So one of our advantages is we spent time in these big promoters, so we understand what happens in a room, a conference center, an arena, a stadium, or even a multi-day, multi-stage music festival. We're keenly aware of things like camera placement. We don't want to have seat kills. We have to be cognizant of how we understand how a promoter operates and what's important to them. And that's been a big differentiator. But that was I think for me, the three things that had developed in my career. One was the Prince interaction. Two was the sale of the business to AEG, which was just a live company that owns a third of the Lakers. They own the Kings, they own the Galaxy, and they own not only Coachella but big entertainment districts and arenas around the world. So I had this operating in a company of live DNA, and then the third was this YouTube experience, and really helping YouTube just explode as a live, platform for video. That really, and those three kind of pillars are really the backbone of how I formed Bulldog DM and how we operate. But clearly, getting in a relationship with YouTube early on definitely drove revenue. I think it made AEG happy as well, and it was a great run for me there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this experience has really made you see massive digital audiences up close, right? And what makes people stay, what makes them engage, what makes them care in real time, and yeah, all those different factors. So very interesting experience. Do you want to add anything to that,
Yeah, I
please?
think that coming through all of that, I still have to remind myself that this is a brand new industry for a majority of companies and industries and people as well. And there's now there's kind of two new dynamics that we're closely following that's affecting everybody, almost, everybody in the market, but everybody in media. And, one is, Netflix. Netflix is curating a very wide portfolio of live programming. I think they started with live streaming the Love is Blind reunion, and then Dave Chappelle and a Chris Rock comedy special, and then everyone knows the Tom Brady roast. And that led to now two NFL games for the next three Christmases. The opening night of Major League Baseball. Now the WWE is on the platform every Monday night. And now that I think they realize this incredible way to drive people to a destination. Maybe they'll also, if they're experiencing a free or a sponsored live stream, they may convert over to a paying customer. They're also selling ads. I think the Mike Tyson fight sold out the advertisers, as have the NFL games. And that's creating a ripple effect. So now we're seeing more live programming on platforms like Hulu, Apple, Peacock. The minute Skydance acquired Paramount, I think within 7 days, they had signed a 7-year deal to live stream the UFC for 7 years at $7 billion. So it's now coming front and center, and it's a top of mind with almost every entity in the business. And then the other development that we're in the midst of is this explosion of live shopping and e-commerce live streaming, which is a
Hmm.
$500 billion business in China. And now we're seeing things like TikTok Shop and Amazon and eBay Live and whatnot, and a whole bunch of platforms where now these consumers are now discovering products in real time. They're asking interactive questions, and they're moving to an in-experience purchase. That's a talk about the wild, wild west. And I thought I had seen it all in 2 decades of being in this industry, but now there's this whole nother world of actual, real, live commerce, and the results are startling with the volume of adoption and conversion. So those two dynamics, yeah, I thought this was going to calm down a little bit, but now we're at a whole different world with these two new, I think, new and exciting, growth areas.
Yes, very exciting. And just a quick comment to all the listeners who are not watching and only listening. If you heard any sighs or animalistic whatever noises, it's the dog behind me. It was not me sighing at what John was talking about, that's for sure, because it's all very exciting. Okay, so so after talking about excitement, right? After everything you've built and scaled, what still excites you enough to say, I want to go all in on this? Is there anything that you could think of?
Yeah, I'm certainly intrigued by the new world of e-commerce. And I've heard advertising executives espousing and saying it's in some ways it helps retail for retailers to operate a business. It's now harder than it's ever been. They still have pretty high rent and the utilities that come with that. And there's a thesis now that retail will become Monday through Friday largely live studios. You'll have the employees, the creators live broadcasting and talking about the products, that you're able to discover and buy them. And then on the weekend, it'll convert back to traditional retail. And when I look at the conversion, it's been reported that live streams offer a 30% conversion in e-commerce, which is 10x. It's usually around 2 to 3%. That's astounding. And because you're able to interact with a trusted creator or with the brand directly and ask further questions, the return rate is down. It drops about 40%. So as I think this opens up the whole world of direct to consumer goods as well. You can now reach an audience at scale without, having to go to a massive big box retailer and get on their shelves. And it's adopted by about 58% of millennials and about 80% of Gen Z. So it's an exciting world. So that I think, keeps us awake and interested. I'm also looking at this from a perspective, it'll combine with our existing business where we're going and helping a Hyundai deliver and showcase the new model of their Elantra at an auto show and how that has to look perfect. And even in the fashion, a lot of fashion shows are live streamed given what's at stake and that high level of pristine video and high quality, high fidelity audio has to render and come through. So, knowing that now there's a whole world where actual conversion can happen is super exciting, and I think it keeps us really thinking. And it's still brand new. It's certainly in the West here. It's TikTok Shop only launched in September of 23, but I think they're projected to do about $24 billion this year in this part of the world. So the adoption rate is mind blowing. So there's never really never a dull moment, and we're always looking at ways to how do we support that industry and how do we support our existing clients getting into it as well.
Okay, well, thank you for this. And where can people connect with you or with your content, John?
Bulldog DM, D as in David, M as in Mary. That's short for digital media, but that's the best place.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this great conversation. So many wonderful insights, but not just that. You also made me really happy with your with your experience that you described with Prince. That was really, really amazing. Although there's a lot more to this conversation than that, of course. Uh, to all our listeners, come back next week. More awesomeness is in the works, and thank you again, John.
Thanks, Regina. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
Your life looks successful on the outside, but doesn't feel right on the inside anymore. If you're done performing and ready to feel fully alive, go to transformyourperformance.com/success now what. If it resonates, we'll take it further together. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, share it, and join us next time.